Okay, let's say that you own a company and it's a family-owned company and it's going to stay in the family, but you got really talented people that you got to keep that are getting recruited by your peers, but you just can't give up family stock, but you want them to build wealth as if they did. I've got a solution for you. Stay with us. Okay, let's say you've got a family business. That's your corporation up here, and it's completely family owned. But you've got a whole set of non-family members that are very, very key to the organization. You can't lose them. You can't afford to give them stock, though, and dilute the ownership of the business. And you can't pay them really any more money than what you're paying them because you're paying them market comp. And you probably have a nice base salary plus bonuses. But you want them to build wealth as if they own stock, but you can't dilute the shares of this stock. And you want to grow the company. You want to help these four build wealth. But on top of that, you got to add 2 or 3 more people and you want to recruit them to the company. What do you do? What is a great option to pull all the pieces together? One of the great ways of pulling together a package for an executive management team is to put together what's called a phantom stock plan. Now, compared to real stock that has a vote on what's happening with the corporation, phantom stock shares do not have a vote. But when you put a valuation formula for the common stock of a corporation, you value the phantom stock exactly the same way. So if it's $20 a share here, it's $20 a share here. If it's $50 a share here, it's $50 a share here. When there's a liquidity event, which means the company is sold and the shareholders here sell out, there's also a liquidity event here with the phantom stock. And if the company sold, whatever the value is of the shares that they own at this point in time, they're able to cash those out as well. And if we're looking at building wealth for retirement, if a person that owns common stock wants to sell their shares at retirement and get their cash out, a phantom stock shareholder can do exactly the same. The difference is phantom stock is not real stock, common stock in the corporation. What you do is you figure out how many shares you want to make available to all those that are participating in the plan, and then you value those shares exactly like you would the real stock that's inside the corporation. And then you offer those to the management team that you have in place. Now, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. When you start the plan, you can just award a number of shares just because people have been on your payroll and they've been around the company for quite some time. You can also put together incentive formulas, and if they hit those benchmarks, then you award shares on an annual basis. One other thing you can do is you can do something in the way of a share awarding to the people that are in finance. Maybe they're in HR, maybe they're in operations, and they don't have anything to do with sales. So you come up with a formula for those folks, but then you go to your sales team and you say, look, I want you to hit these sales benchmarks. And if you hit these sales benchmarks, we're going to award a certain number of shares based on the sales that you do. So you can custom build how the shares are awarded based on a person's responsibility. You could go to the CFO and say, look, we want to have a margin of X amount off of our business, and we want to see a net profit of such and such. And so between you and how you're handling the finances, and between the operations person and how they're handling the inside expenses of the business and the way that the operation is running, you can put a formula in place for them that awards certain a number of shares if they hit these different benchmarks. So you can put in key performance indicators to allow these shares to get awarded to the participants in the phantom stock plan. So this gives you kind of an idea how this works. If the common stock is growing at this rate, whatever portion of the value of the company that you've set aside for the phantom stock that you've awarded the shares, you basically want to figure out how much of the value of the company you really want to make available for the management team. But let's assume it's this much. That stock is going to grow at the same rate that the common stock is growing. The difference is this is not equity. It's not equity in the company. This group doesn't get distributions at the end of the year. They don't have a voting right. This phantom stock plan is a liability. So when I talk about liability, this is booked on the balance sheet of the corporation as debt. It basically means that the corporation owes this money to the participants. Now, we can put this subject to vesting. So you can vest these over time so that you're not in a position where from day one that you have to pay out money if people haven't worked for you for a period of time. So with the vesting, the corporation can make sure that people have to stay for a certain number of years before they can fully vest in the benefit. Now, the way the cash in this phantom stock is available to the participants is, of course, if they die, then they get paid out their shares. If there's a disability as well, at retirement as well, if they terminate employment, the vested portion is the portion that gets paid to them. And if there's a change in control, which means that more than 50% of the stock is sold to somebody else so that you basically have a new owner, then you can make everything 100% vested and pay that out. But this liability, the future owner or the buyer of the company is going to see this future liability, and they might discount the value of the purchase price because they know they've got to pay these benefits out. So it's something that you've got to look forward to or forecast out to make sure that there's cash to support the liquidity events that might occur in this scenario. The other thing you can do too is rather than paying everything out lump sum, you can spread it out over 5 years. So if somebody retires, rather than giving their full amount right away, you can stagger it out over a 5-year period of time. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about now is an action plan. Now, first thing you have to do is to take a look at the people and say, all right, who do I have on the payroll today that I ought to offer this kind of plan? The second thing is how many new people do you think you're going to add to the plan on an annual basis? Are you going to grow regionally and then be looking at adding regional sales managers and marketing and salespeople in different markets? What do you think the addition of people that you would want to involve in this plan, what's that going to look like? And then you've got to come up with the valuation formula. And sometimes, the corporation says, look, I don't want this plan to be any more than 20% of the company from a valuation standpoint. Again, they're not going to own real stock in the company, but if you set a maximum number of shares that you're going to make available that correspond to the real stock of the company, you know what your potential liability is going to look like going forward. So you want to come up with a valuation, but you also want to kind of build a cap on how big you want this plan to get. Then you look at growth expectations. What's this thing going to look like for the owners? What's it going to look like for the participants? If there's a 5% growth versus a 15% growth. And, one of the things that we do is we build the spreadsheets and the models so that you can look at what the impact is on the company if there's 5% growth versus 15% growth, so you can get an idea of what that liability is going to look like down the road. And you certainly don't want to jump into a plan like this until you've charted that all out. So I just talked about the forecasting and the spreadsheeting. You need to also look at the tax impact of doing these plans. And I don't want to get into that today just because there's a lot of nuances. But adjusting for whatever tax impact that might be available on this is important. One of the things that happens is that each time a participant vests in their shares, they've got to recognize not income taxes, but payroll taxes on the vested portion. And they get that out of the way when the numbers are small, so that when they get to retirement and the numbers are big, they don't have to turn around and pay those taxes again. So that's a good idea. Then we got to build the plan documents that spell out how the plan works, what the vesting looks like, what are the liquidity events, and then how they're getting paid out. All of that has to be in a plan document. And then you've got to engage a third-party administrator for the plan. And the administrator will keep track of what the corporation owes all the participants, and they'll produce benefit statements for the participants so they can see how many shares they've got, what the valuation of the shares are, so that they have kind of a statement that they can use to put on their personal financial statement and give them an expectation of what the values are going to look like down the road. And that's important because if a person looks at the values they have in a phantom stock plan, and they know that if they leave the company, they're going to lose 20, 30, 40% because somebody else is recruiting them, they'll think twice about leaving because they don't want to walk away from the non-vested portion of the plan. So you do that with the statements that the third-party administrator presents. Then once we've got that all put together, then we create a presentation for everybody. And that's basically where you want to get them in a room and you want to roll out a plan, and you want to inspire them to show that the employer cares about them and the employer wants to help them build wealth. But we also lay out what do they got to do to perform and to get additional shares down the road. And that's kind of my job, is to get them pumped up to become performers, to get more and more shares in the phantom stock plan. And then we schedule the plan and we roll it out. So that's the basics of putting together a phantom stock plan. They really do work for the right company, but it's important to work with a group like ours so that you can go through all the different options and strategies to help your key management team build wealth. Phantom stock plans are a great solution, and we recommend you take a look at them.